Okay, so in World War One, we had to build up our military first before we could really go and fight. So as we entered the war, it was necessary to get more soldiers to fight. Many progressives at this time thought conscription or forced military service violated both democratic and republican principles. So a new system of conscription was called selective service, resulted in about 2.8 million Americans being drafted. African American soldiers who were drafted faced discrimination and prejudice within the Army, where they served in racially segregated units under white officers. Many African Americans won praise from their commanders and received war medals for their actions in World War I. World War I was the first war in which women officially were allowed to serve. Okay, so now the Navy enlisted some 11,000 women whose jobs included clerical positions, radio operators, electricians, pharmacists, photographs, and so on and so on and so on. The Army, choosing not to enlist women, hired them as temporary employees to fill clerical positions. You also had Army nurses, were the only women in the military to go overseas during the war. Okay, you also had to organize the industry to put it on a war footing. So President Wilson and Congress agreed that the government should not control the economy. Okay, instead, they wanted to establish a cooperative relationship between big business and government to ensure efficient use of resources during the mobilization of the American economy for the war. In 1917, the War Industries Board, or the WIB, was created to coordinate the production of war materials. In 1918, the WIB was reorganized again, and Bernard Baruch, a wealthy Wall Street stockbroker, was appointed to run it. You also had the Food Administration under the direction of Herbert Hoover, which would be responsible for increasing food production while reducing consumption. Hoover asked people to plant victory gardens to raise their own vegetables in order to leave more food for the troops. The Fuel Administration was encouraged people to conserve coal and oil at this time too. And then you also have, you know it and love it, daylight savings time came about during this time, was introduced to conserve energy. Okay, to raise money to pay for the war, the government began selling Liberty bonds and Victory bonds. By buying bonds, Americans were loaning the government money that would be repaid with interest in a specified number of years. Okay, so you also have to get the workforce going. So to prevent strikes, the government established the National War Labor Board, which was the NWLB in 1918. In exchange for wage increases, an 8-hour workday, and the right to organize unions and bargain collectively, the labor leaders agreed not to disrupt war production with a strike. The war increased the need for women in the workforce because the men were going off to fight. So they took factory and manufacturing jobs and positions in the shipping and railroad industries. After the war, women returned to their previous jobs or they left the workforce. The war stopped the flow of immigrants to the United States for a while, which allowed African Americans wartime jobs. Between 300 and 500,000 African Americans left the South to settle in the North, where most factory jobs were located. And this was called the Great Migration, which changed the racial makeup of many of the northern cities. Many Mexicans also moved north, providing labor for the farms and ranches in the American Southwest. Mexicans also moved to cities to take wartime factory jobs. Oftentimes, they faced discrimination and hostility from Americans. Okay, so to ensure public support for the war, you have the Committee on Public Information, the CPI. This was a new government agency that attempted to sell the idea of the war to the American people. Pamphlets and speeches helped deliver patriotic messages. Espionage, which was spying, was addressed in the Espionage Act of 1917. It set up consequences for people who aided the enemy. The Sedition Act of 1918 went a step further by making it illegal to criticize the president or the government at this time. Sounds like a violation of freedom of speech. Suspicions of disloyalty led to the mistreatment of German Americans. Anti-German feelings sometimes led to violence towards these Germans. Now, radical labor activists, socialist pacifists, and anyone appearing disloyal also came under attack during this time. In the case of Schneck versus the United States in 1919, the Supreme Court ruling limited an individual's freedom of speech if the word The word spoken constituted a clear and present danger. Okay, that's just a bit of information about the home war on the home front there and how they organized everything. As always, look forward to maybe a little quiz, and you have a couple more videos left to go. Thank you. Bye.